the 2016 Doom reboot actually hard, or does it just feel hard because the game wakes you up on Mars and immediately tells you to solve a demonic energy crisis with your bare hands? I wanted a real answer, so I replayed the full campaign and tracked every single death. Doom has always had a simple promise: move fast, kill demons, and survive long enough to make the soundtrack feel like it's legally part of your bloodstream. But Doom 2016 adds something sharper to that formula. This is a game about a corporation digging into hell, finding infinite energy, and somehow deciding that the screaming was probably fine as long as quarterly projections stay strong. You start as the Doomslayer chained in the UAC facility on Mars, waking up during the kind of workplace incident that would make OSHA quit before 9:30. From there, the campaign escalates from a contained disaster into a full collapse of the UAC, return to hell, and the reveal that the Slayer is less of a soldier and more of an ancient demonic extinction event with hands. Every mission pushes the same question harder. Is the game difficult because the enemies are overwhelming, or because Doom 2016 refuses to reward scared, slow play? If you're new here, which you likely are since 97% of my viewers are new viewers, this is a part of my larger series to determine difficulty in game. So I'm revisiting some of my favorite games and recording every death so that at the end of it all, I can determine which games are hard objectively speaking. So far, I've taken on the BioShock series and the Halo series. So if you like those games, check out those videos after this one to take part in the larger journey. Also, hit the subscribe button. If you subscribe, you'll also get more frequent uploads of more live gameplay commentary of new and interesting indie games or roguelites or action RPGs. With that said, let's go through Doom mission by mission to see where the campaign actually pushes back, where the deaths pile up, and how the game turned a reboot into one of the loudest comeback punches in modern shooters. Now I know pretty much nobody is playing Doom for the story, but I'll highlight some of the story as I recap each mission anyway. Mission 1, the UAC. As I said, the game kicks off with us waking up in the UAC facility on Mars, and action starts right away. This is the game teaching us the Doomslayer does not need a briefing to understand the problem. It's simple. There are demons, he doesn't like demons, so he kills all the demons. He does it in the most reliable way he knows how, which is ripping them apart. After which we promptly collect our battlesuit and are off to kill more demons. Samuel Hayden immediately tries to frame the disaster as complicated, which tells us the UAC has been managing hell like a risky business unit with poor employee retention. The mission reveals the core conflict fast. The UAC wanted Argent energy, Olivia Pierce opened the door too far, and Mars has become the receipt of every bad decision. The Slayer's silence gives the opening a sharper edge because every monitor, corpse, and demonic symbol tells us he already knows enough. By the end, Hayden admits the invasion was worth the risk, and the Slayer smashing the monitor becomes the campaign's first real character statement. Doom 2016 begins by making the plot simple: stop the demons. Then it uses that simplicity to expose something bigger. The demons are the threat, but the UAC helped build the disaster. Death count. 2 deaths is fair for an opening number. It's essentially the mission that is teaching us aggression more than testing mastery. The UAC gives you enough pressure to prove that standing still is a terrible life plan, but the encounters are readable enough that the game is clearly onboarding the player to its rhythm. The mission is basically Doom handing you a shotgun and saying, "Congratulations, your health plan is violence." So far, not so different from some of the first missions of Halo, so who knows, maybe this game is going to run neck and neck with that series. Mission 2, Resource Operations. Resource Operations expands the opening from a contained outbreak into a full UAC system failure. We move deeper into the Mars facility, and the mission shows how much of the base was built around turning hell into infrastructure. Samuel Hayden continues guiding us, but every line from him carries the same problem. He understands the damage, and he still sounds like a man trying to protect the project that caused it. Essentially, our goal this mission is to restore power to the facility and reposition a satellite dish, of course, right when we are about to. Samuel Hayden redirects us by blocking our access. This is where we get redirected to Vega. Vega adds another layer by giving the mission a colder, more controlled voice, which makes the chaos around us feel even more absurd. The UAC propaganda also starts sharpening the joke because the company treats demonic invasion like a workplace communication issue with flamethrowers. The mission reveals that Olivia Pierce's betrayal is tied directly to Argent energy, which turns the invasion from random disaster into the result of obsession, ambition, and corporate denial. By the end, we have more tools, more context, and a clearer target, but the facility is already collapsing faster than Hayden can explain it away. Resource operations pushes the campaign from waking up angry into understanding exactly who opened the door and who kept pretending the door was worth it. Death count. 6 deaths. This is showing the campaign is starting to apply real pressure without fully taking the gloves off. Resource operations is still early, but the arenas are wider, the enemy groups are more layered, and the game starts rewarding weapon switching, movement, and fast target decisions. The mission makes us prove we learned the first rule of Doom. Standing still is just pre-ordering your own funeral. Compared with the UAC, this death count suggests a noticeable step up in pacing and encounter density. The game is still readable though, but it's already teaching that power in Doom comes from momentum, aggression, and staying just barely ahead of the swarm. Mission 3, Boundary. Boundary turns the invasion into an engineering disaster that is actively tearing Mars apart. With Olivia Pierce identified as the cause of the outbreak, the Slayer is sent into the UAC Foundry. Not only is it overrun with demons, but it is half past due a disastrous meltdown, so our mission is to stop the reactor from going critical. The level shows the physical cost of Argent energy through molten metal, burning machinery, dead workers, broken systems, and a facility that feels like it's already unsafe before Hell got involved. Samuel Hayden still frames the situation through containment and recovery, which makes him feel less like a rescuer and more like the executive who wants the building saved because the equipment was expensive. The mission also sharpens Olivia's role because the disaster now has direction and the campaign has a clearer villain behind the demonic blood. Boundary works as the first real proof that the UAC built its miracle energy system on top of something it could never fully control. We are still solving every problem with violence, but the mission makes that violence feel like the only honest response in a facility buried under corporate denial. By the end, Mars feels less like a base under attack and more like a crime scene with better lighting and worse plumbing. This mission is where the demons we encounter start becoming more extreme as Hell Knights and Hellraisers are introduced. Death count, 7 deaths. Foundry keeps the early campaign readable, but the arenas again are larger, the hazards are nastier, and the enemy's mix starts asking for faster reactions. This is where Doom begins testing whether you can manage movement, target priority, resource pickups, and awareness at the same time. The Hell Knight introduction gives the mission a stronger bite because it adds a larger threat that can close distance fast and punish panic. The demons are starting to push back, but not in a way that creates a full-blown wall of difficulty. Essentially, Foundry feels like the demons are checking out paperwork before letting us into the real disaster, and because this is Doom, our paperwork is filled out in blood. Mission 4, Argent Facility. Argent Facility brings the campaign onto the Martian surface and makes the scale of the UAC's mistake feel much larger. The facility is built around Argent energy, and every piece of machinery shows how completely the UAC turned Hell into a power source. Hayden sends the Slayer to disable the Argent filters, but of course he still sees the energy system as something worth preserving. Our response is direct. We destroy the filters because in our simple mind, founded on violence, the invasion cannot be separated from the technology that made it possible. That choice turns the mission into a character statement because the Slayer treats Hayden's greater good argument like a customer service complaint from Hell's regional manager. Olivia Pierce becomes more dangerous here because she's moving faster than Hayden can contain, and the mission creates the sense that we are chasing someone who has already planned the next disaster. The outdoor setting also gives Mars a stronger identity with industrial platforms, red dust, and massive UAC structures showing how deeply the company carved into the planet. By the end, the campaign has shifted from emergency response into sabotage, and the Slayer is clearly willing to burn the UAC's future to close the door they opened. Death count, 8 deaths. 8 deaths continues the steady climb from Foundry and shows Hell is adding more pressure without breaking its flow. At this point, the demons are still fighting fair, but it's starting to make hesitation expensive. Argent Facility feels like Doom handing you a moral dilemma, and then immediately handing you a shotgun so that dilemma can be resolved loudly. Mission 5, Argent Energy Tower. Argent Energy Tower turns the campaign into a race against Olivia Pierce. After the Slayer destroys the Argent filters, Olivia moves to the tower and uses the UAC's own energy system to push the invasion forward. The mission works because the tower feels like the perfect symbol of the whole disaster. Huge, powerful, impressive, and built directly on top of something nobody should have trusted. Hayden still wants control, Olivia wants transformation, and us, the Slayer, we want the entire machine broken before it can feed Hell any further. Climbing the tower gives the mission a strong sense of escalation because every platform brings the player closer to the source of the UAC's ambition. The ending cutscene lands because Olivia succeeds anyway, opening the portal and proving Hayden's damage control has completely failed. The Slayer has been unstoppable in every room so far. But this mission shows that raw violence cannot always outrun someone who's already rigged the system. By the end, the campaign has crossed the threshold from Mars containment into direct descent into hell. Death count, 8 deaths. Difficulty is staying about the same and consistent with Argent Facility, but the pressure feels different here. Argent Energy Tower adds verticality, platforming, and longer arena sequences that force us to manage movement more precisely. The mission also starts to make the environment feel dangerous because falling, climbing, and fighting all share the same space. The death count suggests that the mission pushed through positioning and momentum rather than one overwhelming enemy wall. Feels like Doom is asking if we can fight demons while climbing industrial scaffolding built by people who clearly hated guardrails. The result is a level that stays fair but keeps enough pressure on us to make Olivia's escape feel earned. Mission 6, Katangir Sanctum. Katangir Sanctum throws us directly into hell after Olivia opens the portal at the Argent Energy Tower. The campaign leaves the UAC facility behind and enters a place that feels older, stranger, and far more personal to the Slayer. The mission reframes us as an angry man in armor into a figure hell already recognizes and fears. Of course, our main goal is to fight our way through hell and return to Mars. While we are fighting our way through, the Slayer testaments start turning our silence into mythology, describing us as a force that demons have tried and failed to bury. The lore changes the tone of the campaign because we are now walking through enemy territory as the monster in their legend. Hayden's corporate explanations fade behind skulls, temples, blood rituals, and the sense that the UAC stumbled into a war that began long before Mars. The mission also makes Olivia's plan feel larger because the portal has connected modern science with an ancient conflict the UAC and Samuel Hayden barely understand. By the end, the Sanctum has expanded Doom from a containment failure into a mythic revenge story where hell already knows exactly who we are and how we showed up. Since the demons know who just showed up, they throw us a nice reunion party by introducing the floating cacodemons, the flying lost souls, and the savage barons of hell. Death count, 4 deaths. 4 deaths is surprisingly controlled for the first full hell mission. The Sanctum looks more hostile than the earlier Mars levels, but the encounters are readable enough that I settled into the new setting without getting buried. Honestly, I think the fast playstyle required to survive Doom is more up my alley than that of other games like Halo, and that's why this game hasn't been giving me any trouble as of yet. I think it's funny because we can compare it to Halo, and I was fighting walls of difficulty at this point because it's just that slow playstyle required to survive in Halo. But seriously, this feels like the campaign opening a giant curse door and saying, relax, the architecture is worse than the difficulty. The result is a mission that feels massive without turning it into the biggest mechanical spike yet. Mission 7, Argent Facility Destroyed. Argent Facility Destroyed begins with the Slayer returning from Hell to a Mars facility that has been ripped open by the portal. The Argent Tower is gone, Hell has overrun the surface, and the UAC's Miracle Energy project now looks like a planet-sized liability. Hayden greets our return with optimism because he sees a path to recovery, but the environment says the damage has already outrun his control. The mission reframes Mars as the middle ground between corporate science and Hell's invasion, with even broken platforms and burning machinery showing how completely those worlds have fused. The new objective sends us towards the Lazarus Labs, where the Argent Accumulator can help reopen the path to Hell, leading us towards the Crucible. That setup gives us in the campaign a clearer long-term goal. We need the Crucible to shut down the portal for good. Olivia's victory at the tower now has consequences across the whole facility, and Mars feels like it's being converted room by room into Hell's front lobby. We've moved past containment and into the search for the one weapon that can end the invasion at its source. Death count, 11 deaths. Not much to say here. The game is still fair, but the margin for sloppy movement is shrinking fast. Mission 8, Advanced Research Complex. Advanced Research Complex is a little detour before Lazarus Labs, and it brings us, the Slayer, back face-to-face with Samuel Hayden. This changes him from a remote handler into a physical reminder of the UAC's ambition. He forcibly installs a dimensional tether into the Praetor suit that then explains the UAC's knowledge of Argent Energy came from the Helix Stone. The Helix Stone paints the big target for us to go rip and tear. The well in Hell, the energy source keeping the portal active. Unfortunately, my recording of this mission got corrupted, so you'll just have to imagine a big robot that is Samuel Hayden right now. But this mission is where we also get to pick up the BFG 9000, which feels like the UAC accidentally built the perfect employee offboarding tool for D. Death count, 14 deaths here, makes Advanced Research Complex the hardest mission so far. It is almost a 50% jump from earlier missions, so the demons are tightening their grip, applying more pressure while also keeping or asking for cleaner arena control. This mission introduces heavier combinations, bigger spaces, and more movement where we have to manage threats from every angle. That's in part why I feel like the game gives us the BFG 9000. If you start to get overwhelmed, just drop your own personal demon nuke to experience Serenity again. Of course, because I'm an old school scarcity gamer, I have hardly ever used the BFG 9000. Like, what happens if I need the ammo later, right? Well, reality is, that just makes the game harder for myself, but hey, it's a nice challenge. Even without playing stupid like that, the level earns its difficulty because the story is escalating, bigger lore, bigger tools, and bigger consequences. Mission 9, Lazarus Labs. This is finally where we enter Olivia Pierce's domain, and the mission shows how far her obsession with hell has already spread before the invasion fully broke loose. The lab reveals a company studying demonic bodies, artifacts, portals, and argent energy with the confidence of people who heard screaming from another dimension and started building a conference room around it. The Helix Stone gives us the knowledge needed to reach the well, which turns the mission into a final piece of setup before the campaign returns to hell with purpose. Olivia's role also becomes clearer because her betrayal grows out of years of sanctioned research, private ambition, and a USC culture that treated impossible danger as career development. The Cyber Demon fight gives the mission its major payoff by turning the UAC's experiments into a living punishment that the Slayer has to break apart. After the Cyber Demon falls, we use the Argent Accumulator to rip open a path back to hell, where we take on the Cyber Demon again. By the end, we're done with investigating and have moved on to execution. The Slayer knows where the source is, and the only thing left is to enter hell and shut it down. Death count, 28, 33, or 5. Lazarus Labs is on Mars, but you could have fooled me if you said this was in the deepest, darkest depths of hell. Fun fact, this is another mission where my footage got corrupted, so I played it twice. First time, I got annihilated 28 times, making this first and biggest difficulty spike of the game, and 2, the most difficult mission of the game for me. The Cyber Demon fight is obviously the centerpiece because it tests patience, precision, in a way that normal arenas usually avoid. The reason the first time was so hard is because I blew my load of BFG ammo on the Cyber Demon in the first encounter because I was thinking, let's use the ammo to make the game easier, right? Well, I learned the hard way that that's just gonna make the second encounter harder, like 10 times harder because I had to whittle down his health one shotgun blast at a time. Not to mention, I had a major skill issue of double jumping his attacks, taking a load of damage each time versus just jumping once. So by the time I was playing through it the second time playing through so I could have footage of the fight, I saved BFG ammo and mastered the dodge cadence, resulting in only 1 death on the Cyber Demon. The second time playing through the mission punishes panic hard, especially when health, armor, and ammo management starts feeling like 3 separate fires in the same kitchen. Compared with Advanced Research Complex at 14 deaths, this is a massive jump, which tells us Lazarus Labs becomes the first real progression stopper of the run. It feels like the game is finally looking at everything it has taught us and says, great, now prove it. Prove it while this building science project tries to tear your spine from your body. Mission 10, Titan's Realm. Titan's Realm drops us, the Slayer, deeper into hell after the Cyber Demon fight and shifts the campaign into an ancient battlefield territory. This mission is built around the remains of a massive dead Titan, which makes hell feel less like a demon homeworld and more like a graveyard for wars that happened long before the UAC arrived. The scale tells us the Slayer's history with hell is older and bloodier than Mars's outbreak. Every skull gate, ritual chamber, and corpse-covered arena builds the sense that the Crucible belongs to a conflict with mythic weight. The Slayer is chasing the weapon that can shut it all down, the well. And the mission turns that search into a descent through hell's own history. Aiden and the UAC feel far away from here, because the story is now driven by the Slayer, the demon, and the ancient power both sides understand. Death count, 1. This mission is a refresh button on difficulty after Lazarus Labs. Titan's Realm looks intimidating, but the actual run was far more controlled, in part due to the fact that weapon upgrades, ammo upgrades, runes, and everything are reaching their peak power. The game is still throwing hell at us, but now we are speaking fluent shotgun, making this one giant victory lap through a dead giant. Mission 11, the Necropolis. The Necropolis pushes the Slayer through one of Hell's most sacred and hostile spaces in search of the Crucible. After Titan's Realm established the scale of the ancient Hell, this mission turns that scale into a guarded tomb built around power, rituals, and fear. The Slayer is no longer following the trail of the UAC's mistakes. We're now moving through Hell's own defenses to take a weapon that can end the invasion at its source. The mission reveals how seriously Hell protects the Crucible because the weapon is treated like a relic powerful enough to change the outcome of the war. The Hell Guards give the level its major story payoff by turning the search into a trial, forcing us to defeat the Guardians before claiming the blade. Their defeat reinforces the mythology built across the campaign. Hell can delay him, trap him, and surround him, but it cannot keep him away from what he came to take. Getting the Crucible gives the campaign its final direction because the Slayer finally has the tools needed to shut down the well. By the end, we're beelining it back towards the source of the invasion. Death count, 3 deaths. Again, not much to say here, just another mission where the rhythm of doom hits and rewards your skills that you've slowly built up to this point. Mission 12, Vega Central Processing. Vega Central Processing brings the campaign back to Mars with the Crucible in hand and one final path back to Hell. The Slayer needs to reach the well, and Hayden's plan requires destroying Vega's core to create the portal that can send us there. Think of this as the UAC's ritual sacrifice to survive. This gives the mission a different kind of weight because Vega has been one of the calmest voices in the campaign, built out of screaming, fire, and corporate failure. The mission reveals that the UAC's most advanced system has become disposable once the invasion reaches its final stages. Vega accepts his destruction with a strange calm, which makes the moment feel colder than most of the campaign's louder deaths. The most important thing to note is the Slayer backing up Vega before the core is destroyed, giving him a small but meaningful character beat showing that his rage has direction, his violence has boundaries. The mission turns a technical objective into a quiet sacrifice because the path to the well is opened by shutting down the one UAC creation that actually helped. By the end, Mars has served its purpose, and the campaign sends us, the Slayer, back into Hell to finish the source of the invasion. Death count, 7 deaths. 7 deaths makes Vega Central Processing a controlled step up after the Necropolis. The mission is basically the world's worst IT shutdown request, except the computer is polite, the building is exploding, and the help desk answer is still a shotgun. Mission 13, Argent Denure. Argent Denure sends us back into Hell for the final mission. The campaign finally reaches the source of the invasion. The well is powered by trapped race, which turns the final objective into something bigger than destroying machinery or closing another portal. The Slayer uses the Crucible to free the race and then cut off the energy keeping the connection between Mars and Hell alive. That gives the ending a mythic quality, because the weapon the campaign has been chasing becomes the key to ending a war built on stolen power. Olivia Pierce reaches the end of her path here, and her transformation into the Spider Mastermind shows how completely Hell used her ambition against her. The final boss makes her downfall feel like the last physical form of the UAC's arrogance, obsession, and refusal to leave Hell alone. After the Spider Mastermind's fall, Hayden pulls us back to Mars using the tether and takes the Crucible, proving he still believes Argent energy can be controlled. The campaign ends with the invasion stopped, the Slayer betrayed, and humanity's savior locked away because the man who caused the disaster still wants to keep the power source. Death count, 9 deaths. This gives Argent Denure a strong final mission count without reaching the brutal spike of Lazarus Labs. The level has real endgame pressure, but by this point we have an arsenal and plenty of upgrades to assist us through. The Spider Mastermind adds the final test because the fight demands movement, pattern reading, weapon choice, and resource awareness under constant pressure. The game has spent 12 missions teaching us to survive chaos. Then the finale asks us to cash in on the whole degree while fighting a giant demon brain. So, once all is said and done, how does Doom measure up? After all 13 missions, Doom 2016 finished with 108 deaths, not counting my second playthrough of Lazarus Labs, which makes it a tough campaign, but also surprisingly readable. The game rarely feels random. Most of the deaths come from losing rhythm, making bad movement choices, or getting trapped in arenas where enemies are punishing panic immediately. That's why Lazarus Labs stands out so much with 28 deaths. It was the moment where the campaign stopped asking if we understood Doom's combat loop and started asking if we could survive it while a cyber demon tried to turn me a piece of workplace debris. This brings the game's total difficulty in line with some of the later Halo games while still being far easier than Halo 3 ODST and the Bioshock game. So, is Doom 2016 hard? Yes, but its difficulty is rarely cheap. It's hard because it demands confidence, movement aggression, and fast decisions. By the end, the game proves that Doom did not need to come back quieter, smarter, or safer. It came back louder, meaner, and somehow with better corporate satire than most office jobs. The real question is, how does this first entry in the reboot measure up to Doom Eternal, where hell gets faster, and movement is the life force that sustains you? Tune in next week to find out, and if you've made it this far into the video, you may as well subscribe to the channel and like the video because support like this goes a lot further than you could ever imagine. Until next time.
With this, we can continue our work. I am not the villain in this story. I do what I do because there is no choice.
Rerouting tether coordinates complete.
Our time is up. I can't kill you, but I won't have you standing in our way.